Hello and welcome to my presentation for livable cities in a postcard world, building a better normal in the age of COVID-19. Today we'll be looking at lessons from the cities of Delft in the Netherlands and Ghent in Belgium. COVID-19 has brought on a real need for change. It has impacted what we consider to be normal urban mobility, and it has also exposed a major flaw in how UK cities had been planned post-World War II. It has exposed a striking imbalance between infrastructure for motor traffic and cars and infrastructure for everyone else, for cyclists and pedestrians. Now, in response to COVID-19, the UK government has issued a set of guidelines for safer travel. These guidelines include social distancing where that's possible, restrictions on car sharing, and more importantly, perhaps restrictions on public transport, advising for off-peak travel where available, increased space requirements for buses and train wagons, etc., etc. However, if you ever stood in a crowded London Underground wagon in the middle of rush hour, you would know that these measures advised by the government, these guidelines, are not always possible to be implemented. Um, so the direct impact of COVID-19 to the way people choose to travel through the city is felt by everyone, and it has upset much of what we have come to consider the norm in terms of urban mobility. Um, it has, however, encouraged the use of bicycle and pedestrian movement, and the government actually supports that in order to alleviate this pressure on public transport and the road network. So with public transport not being a realistic option anymore for mass travel, and with predictions for heavily congested streets as a result of that, now more than ever, appropriately designed cycleways and footpaths are needed. The UK government's response to these new emerging needs has been quite bold. In taking action, the government has published in late July 2020 a new comprehensive plan for cycling and walking called Gear Change, a bold vision for cycling and walking. And the plan narrates a vision of how to make England a quote-unquote great walking and cycling nation. The plan is also complemented by cycle infrastructure design, local transport node, and cycling and walking investment strategy safety review, and it sets out the actions required at all levels of governance in order to achieve the goals set by the government uh, in response to these new needs by the year 2030. And an evidence of how bold this plan is, I quote from the document itself: places will be truly walkable. A travel revolution in our streets, towns, and communities will have made cycling a mass form of transit. Cycling and walking will be the first natural choice for many journeys, with half of all journeys in towns and cities being cycled or walked by 2030. Now, this new travel revolution that the document speaks about will only come through a massive change in what we consider to be the norm today for urban mobility. But how does this change come about? For this, we look abroad and we see how other cities have achieved this vision. We start with the city of Delft in the Netherlands, where change came from below, came from ordinary citizens of the city. For context, Delft is a small historic student city situated between Rotterdam and The Hague in the south of the country, with a current population of approximately 100,000 people. The problem in Delft, much like the rest of Europe, was with post-World War II urban growth, which was completely dominated by the car. It was designed around motor traffic. The first few decades, especially after the war, can be considered an era of car dominance, as they have led to a radical change of the urban landscape. And this change, unfortunately, came with deadly consequences. A 1973 National Statistics report for traffic fatalities accounted for 450 child deaths. Now, this led to widespread citizen-led protests and the formation of very active grassroots activist groups, the largest and perhaps most influential being Stop the Kindermord, which quite somberly translates to Stop the Child Murder, which exposes the severity of the problem. Now, this group advocated for a different urban reality, for a more livable city with adequate and safe space for all. The solution for the problems faced by the country came in the form of tactical urbanism. These activist groups and ordinary citizens utilized tactical urbanism as a tool to reclaim their residential streets back from cars and make their neighborhoods safe for all. One prime example of tactical urbanism used this way came in the form of the Woonurf, which was first implemented in the city of Delft. Now, what is a Woonurf? A Woonurf is an idea, is a scheme that rejects traditional traffic segregation measures which benefit motorists above pedestrians and cyclists. The idea, in fact, prioritizes cyclist and pedestrian movement and encourages the use of street furniture, planters, and trees to physically minimize the space available for cars. Now, this was implemented across Delft, and the success was phenomenal. The scheme was so successful that its popularity far surpassed the extents of Delft, with Woonurven implemented across the country and extending even beyond the boundaries, the borders of the country. It was a milestone success that helped in achieving a significant reversal in planning and transport policy towards the end of the 1970s, which eventually initiated the gradual transformation of the Netherlands into the country that we know today, into the cycling capital of the world. This picture illustrates a typical example of a Woonurf in a residential area in Delft. As you can see, street furniture, planters, and trees break up the space and give it a more human dimension. The result feels organic, it feels casual, it feels normal, it feels that this is a place built for people by people. Change, however, does not only come from below. There's no one size fits all. In the case of Ghent in Belgium, change actually came from above. It came from political willingness to change. For context, Ghent is a historic city. It's the third largest city in Belgium, the capital of the East Flanders region in the northwestern part of the country, with a current population of 260,000 people. The problem in Ghent, much like Delft, has been a historical car-centric urban growth, which saw the city's central urban core being completely dominated by motorized traffic. For years, traffic congestion has plagued the historic center of the city, with 50% of all traffic being identified as through traffic. These cars did not even stop in Ghent, they just passed right through it. The solution to this problem came in a very radical plan called the Circulation Plan, which was published and enacted by the city of Ghent in 2017, a plan that was radical both in its approach and its implementation. The message from city officials for enacting this plan was quite clear. The circulation plan would keep the city center livable. What made this plan radical was firstly its planning and regulatory approach. The plan included the expansion of the city center limits to include everything within the city's inner ring road, forming an area which was then subdivided into sectors and quarters. These sectors were structured around a framework of physical barriers and regulated by a set of guidelines that were specifically designed to minimize car use to the benefit of pedestrians, cyclists, and public transport services. These guidelines included restrictions for motor vehicle movement between sectors. If someone wanted to drive from one sector to another, they would have to necessarily use the inner ring road. It also established a car-free permit-only zone around the historic center of the city. It pedestrianized the main commercial streets of the city, broadcasting the message that these streets were not for cars, they were for people. And it also encouraged cycling through the creation of bicycle priority streets, as well as through the creation of adequate cycling infrastructure, which came in the form of bridges and tunnels. These bridges and tunnels circumvented the inner ring road, and they allowed people to travel freely and safely from the suburbs into the city center. Another testament to this radical approach came in how the plan was actually implemented. The guidelines came into effect on the 3rd of April 2017, and all measures were enacted and took place within the time frame of a single day, literally overnight. To do so, the city utilized simple materials such as road paint, concrete blocks, and flower beds to use as pop-up placeholders for future permanent structures, and overnight they transformed the city. Now, such a feat was only made possible, simplistic as it sounds, by months and months of meticulous preparation prior to the day. This preparation included coordinated multimedia dissemination of information to the public so that everyone was aware that this was happening, and close collaboration with all major navigation mapping platforms such as Google Maps, Apple Maps, TomTom, etc., etc. And the result was a resounding success. As a result of the political willingness showed by city officials, the city center was transformed, and pedestrians, cyclists, and the people of Ghent were able to reclaim their streets back from cars. The success and popularity of the scheme were actually very beneficial to the city officials who dared to aim high in the first place. The mayor and city officials were subsequently re-elected on the basis of the success and continue to this day to take even more progressive steps towards sustainable urban mobility. This photograph illustrates one of many examples of how the city used simple materials such as red paint to achieve their goals. In using red paint in this particular case, they send a clear visual message that this space is no longer for cars, it is now for pedestrians, for cyclists, for the actual people of Ghent. And along with the circulation plan, which ensures that a very limited number of cars enter the city on each given day, the streets have truly been reclaimed by the people of Ghent. Now we look at opportunities for the future. We look at how UK cities can build and achieve a better normal. 2020 has certainly been an era of change and for change, with the pandemic presenting us with an opportunity for reflection and retrospection on how we did things so far, as well as discussion on how our cities can now recover from this and move forward in a sustainable way. The UK government's initial response that came in the form of a £2 billion investment package for cycling and walking, as well as the publication of gear change in late July 2020, constitutes a historic moment for cycling advocacy in the UK and can be the foundation that we can build upon for this much needed urban travel revolution that gear change talks about. So now UK cities, having for the first time perhaps state, financial, and legislative support, have a monumental opportunity to aim high, to learn lessons from abroad, from cities who have already been through this and have already achieved these goals, and look into the future with confidence in creating a truly sustainable urban mobility future for our cities. So the question now is, will UK cities seize this opportunity in front of them to build a better normal?